I want to invite Ken back, and we'll have some questions. And Tim is here with a roving microphone. So, questions for Dr. Catchpole or Dr. Patterson?
Great. I'm just going to this. It's terrific talks. I mean, I could soak this stuff up all day because I think it's so important and it's interesting. Just since this one's recent in my head, Emily, you talked about, I think you labeled it context-based goal prioritization. Did I have the term right? And you admittedly, bravely shared it, with the need for more development. I love that. Is essentially the hierarchy of code right now, as things are now, fairly standardized, with obviously opportunities for improvement, but code blue, rapid response teams, and then lower levels of essentially reset of a clinical team. Is your concept just an extension of that structure, rocking the wings, as you said, with the aviation analogy? I'm just trying to make sure that that's in the same neighborhood. And the reason I ask is because obviously everybody who's a human factors expert understands what you're saying very exquisitely. The rest of the world in healthcare, has at least a crumb to start with. And basically, is your idea an extension of that and an application of what are we all doing right now and what is the priority right now? What are the priorities? And in particular, what I'm hearing you say is they are changing. We are changing them. Everybody get on board. Is that, can you just say a little bit more about that?
That's better than what I'm doing. I like that better. Do I need to do something to turn this on? Thank you. Test.
Yeah, there you go.
After that code blue, I'm terrified. So I actually submitted a paper that hopefully will get accepted soon to the October Human Factors Conference, the Aspire Conference, where I talk about context-aligned automation. And hopefully I'll figure it out by the time the submission is, which is I think in May sometime. But literally what I'm doing is a collaboration with my husband, who's an operations researcher. So for example, he does scheduling of packages for DHL, scheduling of flights for NetJets, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I will. In NetJets, if you do automated scheduling, one of the reasons it fails is because the most prestigious pilots end up getting like the weekend times. So taking into account kind of the hierarchy and status of the pilots is socially, it hurts, but it's actually how things are done. And so it's sort of like that acknowledging that sometimes we don't do code blue. Yes, we do code blue for, obviously, if somebody's event disconnect to code blue, we're going to do that first, right? But there are, I think, a lot of times where in order to get things accepted, we do things that we're not super proud of in terms of how we schedule our nurses to patients, and maybe a nurse isn't as good as others, so they only get 3, or, so there are things that we do, particularly with scheduling and with prioritization, and the goal is to kind of allow people to use tools without forcing on them the correct, no matter what, prioritization. And so sometimes it's because today is a certain day, and sometimes it's because maybe that nurse really shouldn't have more than 3. And so that's kind of where the idea is from, is thinking about schedules and priority lists with objectives and assumptions, and which objective is first is often not what you program into the original OR algorithm. So you're basically changing the algorithm to have a different objective first.
Hello. Hey, Dr. Patterson, question for you. It's Ajay. How do you foresee real application of everything you talked today? Will that be led by an EHR vendor, or will be led by the health systems? And if the health system going to lead these initiatives, how you see the integration with all the regulatory HIPAA and interface issues? What do you foresee in the future for the application of all these initiatives?
What a great question. So in the short term, almost everything I suggested is with relation to some vendor that already exists. So Abridge and Nuance Stacks are on the market. People are selling it. It has ambient communication technology. It's integrating into Epic. Epic has its own telemetry alarms. ConnectSol is a secondary alarm notification system. They could use it. My vision for the future, if you really want to know, is we have a nationally controlled, federally controlled, minimum functionality, interoperability-oriented kind of like patient identifier. And then we have modules that can be developed within an ecosystem, maybe started by the federal government pays for, create the vitals package, create the whatever. And so I want to break the monopolies of the current electronic health record companies and have modular replacement of their features using a common database that is federally oriented at security, safety, interoperability only. So I think that could happen in 10 years. In this country. I do. I think it could happen. Go ahead.
The question is how would these technologies be applied? Is that right? And in the kind of organizational. So there's a one of the things I didn't get to talk in all the stuff I said, didn't really talk about enough, was that there is a big gap between the equipment designers and the organizations that use them. And I would love to see, and I think there actually is an interest in having better interactions. In other words, the devices are designed in kind of work as imagined, and used. So, and I think there is a growing realization that there needs to be a better interaction between the people who are designing devices and technology and the real work that's being done. And so I would love to see, a better interaction there. One of the big challenges is the legal issue of the responsibility for who's responsible for a device. So, for example, with surgical robots, there's sort of been legal cases that say the hospital is responsible for whoever uses that device, regardless of for example, its design. So I think there's going to be lots of really interesting barriers to overcome. So I don't know how that looks, but I think if we go back to the idea, one of the things I talked about at the very start is that technology has, not only these, it changes the work that people are doing, it will have vast organizational impacts. So it may well be that to get an AI to be truly beneficial, that the organizations will need to change. They'll need to, and the interactions between the providers or the designers or the technologists and the clinicians and organizations will need to change. So actually, I think that these things will change. I don't know how they're going to change, because that's not as easily predictable. And I think that's also the exciting thing, that maybe there's an opportunity to change in the ways that might not only benefit our patients or benefit the particular application that we're thinking about, but actually help us to think about the system in a different way. And I think that was one of the messages from our first 2 days, that AI is going to have profound organizational effects, as well as helping us detect, retain foreign objects.
Yeah, we're not going to just plug an AI module into existing silos, but we're going to sort of change that whole system. And we have time for one more question, but I wanted to make a comment about the alarm fatigue and the code blue alarm. When I was an intern in a hospital, St. Mary Hospital in Long Beach, California, very heavy ICU kind of internship in internal medicine. My first day, I was on call in the ICU. And interns don't get paid a lot, so like a big night out, my wife and I went to McDonald's. The French fry alarm, that signals the employees that the French fries are ready, was exactly the same as our code blue alarm. Every time the French fries were ready, my blood pressure spiked. I was So later, as a radiology resident, I was frequently called upon to run up to the pediatric intensive care unit and put an ultrasound transducer on a baby's head and scan them. And the cacophony of noise in there was just incredible, all the constant alarms, and no one seemed to notice them except me. So when you change an alarm and suddenly they're hearing it, it's almost as if, oh, well, now we have an alarm, we didn't have one before. But the truth is we had a complete noise environment of alarms. And, but I still went to McDonald's because, it was great. I love the French fries, despite the PTSD effect that it had on me. So, yeah, now it does, yeah. So we have time for one more question in the back.
Hi, Susan Harkness-Regley from Penn Medicine. Emily, I just want to come work with you. I think that this is exactly, both of your talks were awesome. I think looking into surgery, like how can this actually be used? And that's the question I came here really wanting us to try to address. How can this be used? I'm charged at Penn with thinking about, the stuff coming down the pike from Epic, from vendors, from everywhere. We're using the ambient listening technology. We're using the drafting patient messages technology. But, it's like spaghetti just being thrown at us. And I think that, what you did in looking at what problems it could be put to is really, really good. Amazing. I think that the flip side of the question, and I asked this at our small group yesterday as well, is working both ourselves with users and with people developing the technology to figure out what is AI, and particularly LLMs, because that's a space that we know the least about. What is it good at? And so if we have a list of problems and a better idea of what is this particular technology good at that other technologies are not just as good at. Like this can't just be a rule-based answer, because if it's a rule-based answer, let's go with that one. It's easier, it's better, easier to make, easier to maintain, et cetera. So I think in terms of like the report, I think those are two sides of things that as somebody who's in the health system world, I'm just really hungry for.
Thank you. That's a perfect transition to our small group reports.
He paid me.